Institutions of Higher Education and Controlled Unclassified Information, featuring Federal Student Aid Chief Information Officer, Mia Jordan.
Welcome to the Federal Student Aid Training Conference. I'm Mia Jordan. Today we'll be discussing institutions of higher education and the Controlled Unclassified Information requirement. Specifically, we'll be talking about driving the change, the NIST Special Publication 800-171, and the future state. On April 29th, 2019, the personal information of current and former faculty, students, staff, and student applicants of Georgia Tech was accessed by a hacker through a central database. That database affected by the breach contained names, addresses, Social Security numbers, and birth dates of 1.3 million individuals, and was the university's second breach in less than a year. The University of Connecticut Health is the academic wing that oversees education in medicine, biomedical research, and clinical care. A hacker accessed employee email accounts and compromised patient names, addresses, Social Security numbers, medical records, and more. Now UConn and the University of Connecticut itself are facing a class action suit. In February, Washington State University settled a class action suit for a data breach that impacted 4.5 million people. The incidents keep on coming, and universities are traditionally slow to respond until it's too late. We're here to talk today about the inability of institutions of higher education to stay on top of very real cybersecurity concerns. We're here to describe a circumstance where technology cannot protect sensitive data. We're here to acknowledge that the hackers are winning. No, wait, that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about how we can change the story. While goals and objectives alone will not solve the problem, it's important that we identify our target. We first have to understand what we will get out of ramping up cybersecurity. First, let's talk about our mission. Monitor and reduce cybersecurity risks to enhance the protection of FSA student financial assistance program data, which are collected, received, processed, stored, transmitted, or destroyed by FSA, IHEs, and third-party servicers. Vision. Enable America's students and borrowers to confidently participate in federal financial assistance education programs, knowing that their financial information and the integrity of their transactions are protected. Most importantly, what are our objectives? To educate, to support, and to incentivize partners to mature their cybersecurity postures. Let's address the mandate to protect CUI, oversee and support IHE compliance with the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, as well as other applicable mandates. And let's mature FSA's Title IV data breach capabilities and processes. So now, let's talk about what's the ultimate driver or set of drivers for this. What will motivate, incentivize, necessitate making the necessary changes? After all, change isn't free. It takes money and resources that could always be directed elsewhere. First and foremost, we need to remind ourselves that the genie never goes back into the bottle. Once a data breach has occurred, the data are compromised forever. Did you know that 1 in 3 data breach victims later go on to experience an identity crime? Second, if you've been on the receiving end of a class action lawsuit related to failure to protect sensitive data, you may be more motivated to do a better job of protection in the future. According to ZDNet, 80% of the organizations who responded to a survey reported that they planned to increase security spending in the next year. For some, it will be too late. There are other drivers as well that we'll talk about in this briefing. By applying a threefold approach to drive cybersecurity improvements, we can better meet our protection objectives. Use of GLBA compliance checklists help organizations stay on track. NIST 800-171 provides a framework for the cybersecurity maturity model, which gives organizations benchmarks against which they can measure their progress. And proactive risk management is a best practice that all cyber programs need to employ. Now let's talk about the program goals. The first of which is to understand risks. The second is to identify trends. And the third is to aid decisions. So, as it relates to risks, we need to provide visibility into institutions of higher education, compliance with federal guidelines, and their maturity level. We also need to be able to identify trends that differentiate IHEs with more mature cybersecurity postures versus IHEs that need some support to enhance their program. And finally, let's provide a holistic view of the cybersecurity posture of IHEs to facilitate program decisions. Now let's talk about the real focus of today's session, NIST Special Publication 800-171. The driver of NIST 800-171 is Executive Order 13556. This is information that law, regulation, or government-wide policy requires to have safeguarded or disseminating controls excluding information that is classified under Executive Order 13526, which is classified national security information. This was published on December 29th, 2009. So why do we need a standard framework? There are over 100 different ways of characterizing sensitive information. There's no common definition or protocols. Information inconsistently is marked from organization to organization, and a common definition and standardized processes and procedures are sometimes lackluster. CUI protection requirements are defined in the National Institutes of Standard and Technology Special Publication 800-171, and that is the guidepost by which we will make further decisions. As with so many pervasive challenges, many educational institutions are in the same boat where cyber maturity is concerned. With no standards, commonly accepted definitions, or protocols, we each need to make our way independently, making the climb to maturity all the steeper. Fortunately, we don't each have to invent our own versions of the wheel. We can turn to common resources for guidance. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has done much of the standardization work for us in the form of NIST 800-171. While NIST is not a regulatory agency, that means they cannot enforce compliance. However, by providing standards we can follow, we can advance our maturity more quickly. And the higher our maturity level, the better our data is protected. 800-171 is the framework meant to help organize and mobilize non-federal systems and organizations. Now let's talk about the simple version of 800-171. What does it really mean? One, we're really talking about access control. Who is authorized to view this data? Two, awareness and training. Are people properly instructed into how to treat this data and information? Three, audit and accountability. Are records kept of authorized and unauthorized access? And can violators be identified? Four, configuration management. How are your networks and safety protocols built and documented? Five, identification and authentication. What users are approved to access controlled unclassified information, and how are they verified prior to granting them access? Incident response is the sixth. What's the process if a breach or security threat occurs, including proper notification? Maintenance. What timeline exists for routine maintenance and who is responsible? On to the eighth. Media protection. How are electronic and hard copy records and backups safely stored? And who has access? Physical protection. Who has access to systems, equipment, and storage environments? Personnel security. How are employees screened prior to granting them access to CUI? Risk assessment. Are defenses tested in simulations? Are operations or individuals verified regularly? Security assessment. Are processes and procedures still effective? Are improvements needed? System and communications protection. Is information regularly monitored and controlled at key internal and external transmission points? And finally, system and information integrity. How quickly are possible threats detected, identified, and corrected? Now, the future state. We need each of you in order to design and agree upon the future state. We have a few planning assumptions by which we will move forward. One, that IHEs already have information technology infrastructures in place, and that they are not developing or acquiring systems specifically for the purpose of processing, storing, or transmitting CUI. Two, IHEs have safeguarding measures in place to protect their information, which may also be sufficient to satisfy the CUI requirements. And lastly, IHEs may not have the necessary organizational structure or resources to satisfy every CUI security requirement. However, the possibility of implementing an alternative but equally effective security measure can be met. The possibility of implementing a variety of potential security solutions can be achieved, and institutions may directly or indirectly use managed services to meet these requirements. There are a few prerequisites, though, in order for us to be able to answer those questions. And those prerequisites are around understanding, first and foremost, that a campus cybersecurity program is approved by the department leadership. FSA is resourced and prepared to implement the program. Multi-year timelines are appropriate to requested actions in order to fully implement the IHE cybersecurity program, and that training and outreach sessions are available. FSA has a formal CUI program in place, and information and data are properly marked and tagged. So let's talk about what's next. The planned release for the electronic announcement will be mid-December 2020. We'll be asking that you conduct a self-assessment, and guidance will be provided by FSA. Some security controls may not be applicable to your environment, but we want to understand your environment to be able to build off what you're currently doing. There may be other ways to meet the requirements, and the self-assessment is key to that. Three, we'll be looking at some cost-effective best practices, like how do we isolate CUI into its own security domain by applying architectural design concepts, or how security domains may employ both physical separation, logical separation, or a combination of both. And lastly, how we can use the same CUI infrastructure for multiple government contracts or agreements. Finally, we agree that the protection of student data is paramount. Maintaining their trust is a key ingredient of what we work to achieve each day. Our partnership is necessary to implementing the right controls so that we can continue to provide excellent customer service and providing education opportunities. Thank you.